Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Monday, June 22nd, 2020, and I think my numb part of my face is starting to wear off, so if I am slurring words, it's probably because of that, but I think I sound pretty normal. It just hurts on the left side of my face, but other than that, let's go ahead and get started into this video. So we're actually going to be taking a look at 538's pollster ratings, and I've written down around 12 different polling companies that we pretty much see all the time on Real Clear Politics and 538. They do take the numbers on Real Clear Politics and just plot them on a graph on RCP, as I just said. And in 538, they actually adjust it based off of their ratings of each individual polling firm. Now, I have seen some polls show different results than others, but pretty recently, all of them have agreed that Joe Biden leads by a pretty substantial amount nationwide. The lowest lead for Joe Biden nationwide is 6%, which is double the amount Hillary Clinton had on Election Day in 2016. So I think that right now it is a very good point in time for Joe Biden. This was updated May 19th, so I will say that they should probably update it pretty soon. We do have a number of polls coming out and a number of statewide polls, especially after May 19th was before the whole protests and riots and things that are happening nationwide. So that's something I think which wouldn't necessarily take into account the historical accuracy or methodology of the polling firm itself, but if we do see some drastic number swings in certain states such as Minnesota or Michigan or Wisconsin, whatever it might be, there could be some warning signs for the accuracy on Election Day. So when we take a look at some of these numbers, I've actually rated it by listing it from 538 grade, essentially putting it from best to worst. So we're not actually going to dabble too far deep down into the worst part of the polling firm. This is actually, I'll mention this at the end too, but this is also a member decided video. If you choose the second tier or above on the join button right next to my subscriber tab, you get to recommend a video, and I do produce it. So I'm actually thinking about breaking this video up into two parts. This one's a very service level, just dive from 538's characterizations. There really aren't any other companies that actually assess the polling data and the polling firms themselves, and then I'll probably go a little bit deeper into which ones I personally would rank the best. But in this one specifically, I'll probably just make it a part one, probably do part two a little bit later once we have this updated and a little bit more information out in statewide polls as well, because those are just as important as national polls. But we're focusing pretty much on the national ones right now. The main ones that we see actually rated as A+ are ones that have been pretty much used pretty recently. The Marist college poll has not necessarily a poll, but it has a 538 grade of A+ with a R mean reverted bias, essentially their results in comparison to historical election data based off their accuracy and their methodology. This has a Republican plus 0.3 bias, which means that they do narrowly lean to the right, which most of these polling firms actually, if they're in the A+ range, only narrowly lean in one way or the other. We really only see 1.3%, which is the most we will probably see amongst the A+ rated pollsters. Usually it's less than a percentage point in the left or right direction. So for the Marist College poll, this one actually, they teamed up with NPR and PBS to do a poll for Joe Biden and Donald Trump, and it shows Joe Biden ahead by around 7%. So it does have a little bit of a right-wing bias, but it is very narrow. So we do take that into account. So I would say that the Marist College polls are pretty accurate. They do live caller with cell phones, which is, sometimes they do landline only, which typically has a conservative bias. It really, there's just so many polls that have been analyzed here. I mean, 183. I mean, that's so many. With 84% call rate correctly. So that's actually a really good sign for Joe Biden if this continues through Election Day. As we look in Monmouth University, we see this one pretty often. It shows Joe Biden with a very commanding lead at times and sometimes smaller leads, but recently Joe Biden leads by 11% in the most recent Monmouth University poll, and it is rated A+ from 538 and has a D+ 1.3 bias. So yes, I could see how that may overestimate the overall Democratic vote, but also it's only by around 1.3 points, which means that it's probably not too drastic. It does necessarily agree with the Marist College poll, just off by 4%, but within the margin of error, I would say. 81% races called correctly. I want to see, actually, we'll click that right at the end. ABC News is another poll that we also typically see, nationwide. ABC News always comes out with reports discussing Joe Biden ahead of Donald Trump, or Donald Trump narrowing up the election. So let's go ahead and see the most recent ABC poll. This one was actually taken right as the protests and riots were beginning to happen. So they definitely didn't take into account the impact that they had. And Joe Biden already led by 10% at that point. So I could actually see his numbers increase based off of that. Again, an A-rated pollster. So as we go through this list, we see a number of pollsters start to become a lot more seemingly a lot more credible based off the 538 characterizations. And I know a number of you guys don't necessarily agree with polls or agree with the validity of them and don't necessarily trust them for elections, but they were pretty accurate in 2018. In the House elections, I mean, they were almost always accurate. The national popular vote was very close. In 2016, it was also very close in the national popular vote. So if this is actually going to end up to be very close, it does spell out bad news for Donald Trump in a number of swing states. And the fact that these polls are rated A+ means that they're showing Biden ahead with sometimes double digits, which means it is very credible that Joe Biden might actually win with double digits on Election Day. It's a very good, very accurate. These pollsters are just very accurate and are all showing very good news for Joe Biden. So let's actually keep going through the list. So I have Fox News. I believe that one is also an A-rated pollster. Fox News right here, A-, but still an A-rated pollster. Has a Dem bias of plus 1.4. I would say that's actually pretty substantial, but I will say that the Fox News poll, even if it is adjusted backwards, I mean, Fox shows Joe Biden ahead by 12%, and I don't think there will be a 12-point margin nationwide, but I will say that the fact that it is pretty good for Joe Biden, even if you do move back those numbers to adjust for the inherent bias from the pollster themselves and who they're polling, Joe Biden still has a pretty commanding lead nationwide. So let's actually rush through the rest of these. We have Quinnipiac University. Let's go ahead and see if any of these that I have here. I don't have the New York Times, even though I really should. I just haven't seen too much data come out from them recently. Survey USA. I typically try to avoid using their polls. They did a lot of them in 2008. I know that for a fact, and 2012. I haven't seen them come up too much in 2020 for some reason. That's actually pretty interesting. Again, the New York Times I probably should go ahead and cover as well. Emerson, this one actually comes out with pretty consistent, or did come out with pretty consistent primary data. They do, a number of methodologies, but texting seems pretty weird, and online is also pretty weird. It's like those ads that pop up on the side of your screen and ask you if you want to take a poll. But again, those are just self-selecting surveys. It really all depends. But it has an A- rating from 538, and it has a Dem plus 0.3 bias. So a lot of these actually don't have too much of a bias in terms of their overall ratings. Rasmussen Reports, I actually wanted to go ahead and see if it's on here. I don't know if it's rated top, but Rasmussen Reports almost always shows Donald Trump with a very strong approval rating nationwide. Let's go and see. Yeah, right here. Rasmussen Reports Republican plus 1.5. It's rated C+. I'm actually really surprised, considering the fact that they're always turning out approval polls that show Donald Trump with a much higher approval rating than the rest of the country. Actually, we can go ahead and see the approval polls, job approval for Donald Trump, because they actually are pretty wrong a lot of the times, to be completely honest. A lot of their data is not matching up the rest of the country. So as you can see, there are only two outlying polls in the Hill-Harris poll, which we're actually about to cover right next on my list. But Rasmussen Reports really a 46% approval rating when the rest of the polls average around 43%. I understand it's just 3%, but their disapprove is also very much down. -6 is not the same as -13 or -11 or -14. Yes, they may be overestimating President Trump, but I definitely could see how it's more than Republican plus 1.5. But again, I usually don't take into account Rasmussen Reports too much. The president does like them a lot, though. He seems to retweet them when they show him around a 50% approval rating, which I've seen pretty often on his Twitter account. He does take Rasmussen Reports pretty seriously as an accurate indicator for his approval rating nationwide. So let's go ahead and check out the Hill-Harris numbers, because those also need to be discussed as well. Let's go ahead and see. I'm just going to actually type it in here. That way it's a lot easier for us. But in terms of the way that, let me see. I don't know if this is the same exact one that we're working on. The Hill. Yeah, no. I'm assuming it is, but it has a C rating from 538, so that's not exactly the best for. Yeah, I don't know if that's the exact same one, but even if it was, it wouldn't necessarily be beneficial. But looking at the rest of these numbers, let's go back to the Joe Biden and Donald Trump polling data, and then let's go ahead and just press all and then bring it up. Okay, so when we take a look at a lot of these data, a lot of these polls show Joe Biden with a pretty commanding lead, and they're all rated A, A-, A+, which is a very good sign for Joe Biden. Very credible pollsters are showing him with very substantial leads nationwide. He does have a pretty strong base nationwide right now, and taking a look at 538's numbers, this only increases the validity of some of these polls. I understand you may not necessarily agree with the data being released from the pollsters themselves, but if they have an A+ rating from a company who isn't necessarily super biased, I understand Nate Silver does does have some issues with his personal viewpoint at some point in time, seeping out into his political analysis, but whatever that might be, I mean, it's a human situation. We're doing these themselves. We, of course, have our own inherent bias as much as we try to get rid of it for the sake of, these videos and articles that we write. But these A+ ratings are very strong and, again, increase the validity of these polls. People are going to trust ABC News, even though, President Trump may not necessarily like ABC or CNN. The polls that they have are pretty accurate, and they are showing to be pretty accurate. I mean, a 72% racist called correctly poll is nothing to laugh at. 84% for Marist College. I mean, with even with even more polls, double the amount that ABC News has. Well, I mean, that's a really, really strong, background information to know about these polls, because if they're coming out with Biden ahead by a pretty substantial number, 7% nationwide, when Hillary Clinton led by a mere 3%, keep in mind, leading by 3%, she only ended up winning by 2%, that leaves Donald Trump with a 6% loss nationwide, which means he will likely lose a number of other states. I've seen a number of people comment, yes, Joe Biden can win the popular vote by 5% and lose the election, but that's only if certain population centers in solid Democratic states drive up turnout and swing states do not, which is not realistic at all. Usually America as a whole will increase turnout in all parts of the country, not just California, not just New York, not just Illinois. So other than that, I will say that the fact that these polls are rated so highly for and show Joe Biden with a very commanding lead only backs up my argument more about Joe Biden's chances at the presidency. There are some polls that I would say they do show Joe Biden ahead and are rated C and are rated B, but if they're matching up with data from polling pollsters that are rated A+, that's a very bad sign for Donald Trump, because even if the bad rated pollsters, even if the ones that are as far right and as far left as some of this data might suggest for some of these pollsters, and they're still agreeing with the overall A+ and A- pollsters, and they're showing Joe Biden ahead with a commanding lead, again, that only goes to show that it's very bad for Donald Trump as we progress through this election. So I don't know if they have the largest Democratic mean reverted bias, whatever. Let's go ahead and just ignore that. Let's go back to I want to see the races called correctly. 16 polls, 100% races called correctly. That's really interesting, but they don't have too much data, 2, 3. So it doesn't really matter. Let's go ahead and just go back to pollster and then grade. So that's pretty much it for this part 1 of this video. I do want to go ahead and go a little bit more in depth and discuss which ones I personally would rank the highest. I do think that they should update this. We have a lot more data coming out. It's about a month later, and they probably will. They're probably going to come out with their model sometime soon, so we do have some more information to cover. But I will say that, again, a lot of these polls that show Biden ahead by 12%, A- rating. You see the one from NPR, PBS, Biden +7, A+ rating. ABC News down here, Biden +10, A+ rating. Monmouth University, which shows Biden ahead by 11%, A+ rating. So a lot of these are very credible, and they do have a lot of data backing up their success rate in terms of predicting previous elections, and their methodologies all add up to be very beneficial for these pollsters and give them a lot more credibility than just a random online poll that skews the data. And there's a reason why 538 ranks these higher than a lot of other pollsters. So that's pretty much it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Please go ahead and check out the Instagram at Let's Talk Elect and my Twitter at LT Election. On your screen, you should see a new video that's tailored towards your personal, whatever you want to see on my channel based off YouTube's algorithm, and a playlist for election nights. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and I will see you all tomorrow.